So, welcome to our podcast. I'm Mary Abazia, and of course, is Tom Spitali and Sean Wellham. And we are thinking about trends. We're always thinking about trends because we see that these winds of change are really the opportunities that companies have a lot of times to do something before somebody else does. And it also can be, pretty devastating some of the times if you don't consider some of the trends. So that's why we, are really obsessed with it. And we have been talking among ourselves about 2026 and what trends are really going to impact especially the B2B worlds. So we're going to open this up and start to delve deeper in. And Sean gets to do the first one. Sean?
Okay, I think what's going to strengthen and continue to grow, and it's not a new trend. This isn't about surprise things that no one's thought of, but it's strongly growing, and that's digital health. We talked about it a lot as we went through COVID, everything from telemedicine to consultations remotely, which is a well-established practice now, but wearable devices and devices that communicate directly with your healthcare provider. And I think as we're seeing more and more regulation tighten around these and it becomes more accepted, there's lots of new devices there. We know we can measure blood oxygen with light. We know that we can measure resting heart rate and arrhythmia and those sorts of things. But there's a lot more to come, but it's been held back a little bit by regulation because doctors are very careful what they will act upon and what they will take as evidence, if you like, outside of a clinical setting. So I think we're going to see a second sort of wind around wearable and the broader topic of digital health. I think we had a strong start, a little bit of a slowdown as regulations caught up, and I think we're about to see a pretty fast expansion in both the variation of what's available and the how it replaces what we consider traditional diagnostics.
Mm.
So that's one of a curveball you might call that if you play baseball, I suppose.
Yeah, I love baseball. Um,
Not
health
cricket though, Tom.
Healthcare. Yeah, you have to teach me more about cricket. Very similar game. Healthcare community, I think, has dropped the ball on this. The professional healthcare community. We've been hearing for years and years and years about, a singular, a transferable medical, individualized medical record that is really kind of like the hub of how you get treated by your GP, your specialist, if you happen to be unfortunate enough to have a major event. And, for the most part, that's not really happening, even though the technology exists. I don't know, at least not in the US, Sean, where,
Yeah.
that idea of a single medical record is still taking shape, and that's being, kind to the whole thing. What I see happening is the idea of what you talked about, wearables, my new Apple Watch. I cannot believe the amount of data that this thing captures on me. You talked about, Sean, blood oxygen, arrhythmia, heart rate,
Mm.
resting heart rate, CO2 max, sleep scores. And when you combine that with, here we go again, AI, and feed that into AI and can train up AI, you know, to give you personalized recommendations. I think what's happening is the empowerment of the individual. We still have to be careful. We talked about this on our last podcast about AI can hallucinate. You got to, use good judgment about what you're getting back. But nonetheless, the amount of direction that I can get in my own personal health quest to be in better shape, to perform better on the golf course, to keep whatever, things that I might have a proclivity towards in terms of blood pressure and whatever, in control. What should I eat? When should I rest? How often should I work out? All that stuff.
Mm.
Absolutely incredible, absolutely doable. So I agree that this is just gonna continue. I hope that the medical healthcare community in the US kind of does a better job of trying to harness all of this stuff that's available on us and allow our care to be handed from GP to specialist as needed in a way that's better, more harmonious, that takes into consideration everything that's going on. But I absolutely agree that this is picking up steam.
It's funny you mentioned, Tom, about the technology. I'm just looking at my phone because you're right. The unified health record thing is a lot easier when you have the sort of healthcare system that we have. That's one of the benefits. It doesn't validate the entire system, but it's one of the benefits. And I'm just looking here, and this is my phone telling me on the 16th of February, 1965, I had a smallpox vaccination. On the 27th of July, 1979, I had a booster polio vaccination and a booster tetanus vaccination, and so on. This all my vaccinations all in one place, all the way up to, guess what? The last one is going to be 27th of October 2022. I had the SARS-CoV-2
Mm.
immunization all in one place, and also all my records and reports. You tie that with device wearing, with the group, the volume of data, individuals, and then start to add in the biological data of DNA and genome, that sort of thing. As that starts to come, you have a very integrated, maybe somewhat scary, but targeted health plans. And to your point, Tom, targeted prevention, not targeted treatment, but saying you really need to watch this because of your proclivity to that. You need to avoid X and do more of Y. It's fascinating. Anyway, I'm over egging the pudding, as my grandmother would say. So who's got another one?
Well, I'm going to weigh in on this one, Sean, before you pass it on.
Sorry,
Um,
Mary. That's true. I did not
right.
give you.
That's why you're not in charge of handing off
I'm
the
not in
baton.
charge of anything, Mary. Let's be honest.
So I want to weigh in on this too, because as I agree. I think that the, digital and wearables are you're seeing more and more people with them on their wrists, as kind of a personal indicator. But I do think that it also, some other trends are kind of creating additional wind, if you will, winds of change. And it definitely is that there's a group of people that are getting older at the same time that there are less physicians available to take care of them, or harder, and insurance is crazy, at least in the US. So those other things make it even more important that you personally are managing, the your health. And as Tom said, it would be really interesting to see if there's a way that smart doctors, because you have the concierge services that are, a trend that with mixed reviews are happening. But imagine if some of those physicians really embrace that and say, let me make sure that, I'm watching what you have, what data you have, and let's do so what together, so that they don't have to do all the heavy lifting, but they're able to help them interpret that a bit more, as opposed to Google Doc interpreting all of that, the results. So I think there's a huge opportunity, if not just a physician, a new industry of physician assistants that can help interpret and help people
Hmm,
potentially.
yeah.
Good.
So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tom for his trend. What do you think's really going to shake the earth in
I think it's
2026?
going to be maybe not necessarily shake the earth, but it's a slow burn that over the next couple of years that we're going to see is what I would call the rise of micro-segmentation. 25 years ago, I was involved with a business called Peppers and Rogers Group. Where we were the proponents of something called one-to-one marketing. And the idea was that back then, the advent of databases, interactive technologies, and mass customization technologies were all going to work together so that businesses would not segment groups of people, that every person would be a segment of one, and companies would be able to make mass customized offerings and services to people. And we were way, really ahead of our time. I mean, I've spent the last 25 years looking at companies doing things as recently as 3, 4, 5 years ago that I said we were talking about that in 1998, but I think the technology was probably not as far along as we thought it was at the time. And generally speaking, the business kind of shrunk, and we weren't able to sustain it at the level we were. But now we're there. Now we're all these technologies are there, and the thing that we talked about a couple of podcasts ago was this idea of AI making recommendations instead of search engines, or as search engines not being the only recommendation source anymore, and the idea being that these AI systems are going to learn more and more. Let's put it into a B2B context, more and more about an enterprise. An enterprise AI system is going to have access to everything that everybody's doing in that system. It's going to learn about that business. And when somebody, the CIO goes to that engine to ask it to make a recommendation for a new software, it's going to say, well, I know so much about your organization. I'm going to recommend the type of software that actually fits the needs of this organization. And there's going to be literally tons of data points that are going to feed that. And that's not necessarily going to be the software company that's uh, put the most resources behind marketing themselves. It's going to be the one that understands like these little micro segments, right? And has made their content variable and their offerings variable so that it can serve a lot of different needs. I think what we're going to see is a lot more of that, because you can look at the stats and you can see people are using AI instead of traditional search more and more and more to try to get recommendations. So I see that as a trend, maybe not the biggest trend of 26, but something that if you're listening to this and your business isn't kind of getting ready for this, I think you might be at a disadvantage soon.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that 25 years ago you guys were, I mean, the concept has always been right, one to one. And it's interesting that now you can do it really. I mean, like
Yeah.
in the past you had to have a lot of extra data sets and research, but now you can do it with a few keystrokes. And so I think it's exciting to see how that's going to continue to play. And there are segments of companies that really do want to focus on that customer at that level. Not all, but enough that it should start to shift the market more.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it all ties in. The enabler for this is not just the rich data sets and the availability of data and the digital footprints that people leave. It is, I mean, all roads go to AI at the end of the day. But as AI becomes more than a chatbot and you get this agentic AI model where it's acting on information received and it's making somewhat quasi decisions based on that, then that's the final piece of the jigsaw, because we've had the databases for a while. We've had the idea, as you said, Tom, for 25 years. That idea is not new. It's always been right. It's just always been out of reach. So the fact that we now have both the data, the digital footprints, everything's very little is analog these days, and the ability to make sense of all that noise and find the signals within the noise is the stuff of AI ultimately. And I think you're right. Well, it might not be the biggest trend of 26. I think the foundations and the exponential ramping up of growth in that area is gonna be clear by the end of it. And everybody should be onto that, asking those questions of their own business and figuring out what it could look like.
Yeah. The trend that I'm interested in seeing for 2026 is around the labor and workforce. I mean, for years we've always worked with companies that said, we have a shortage of trained labor. But as things continue to progress, AI is going to play a role in there, and it already is replacing some of the lower end of the workforce. Banks are already having people program it in to train on the basic stuff. But I don't think of that in a scary way. I think of it as that's one of the roles to augment what people are doing. But I do think that you take an industry that has always had labor shortages, and then you add in AI. It's kind of like how do we organize ourselves so that we can use AI to help some of that labor shortage, but then how do you redirect, especially the younger generations that are coming in, and how do we right size their skill sets? So I think that there will be shortages, but I think that just the natural evolution, people will adjust. So that's
I
thoughts on
mean,
that one.
you'd hope so, because if you think about some of the jobs that aren't just this notional lower skill level jobs, you think about jobs that employ an awful lot of people. Hospitality, waiting on tables, that's going to go. No one's going to need someone to stand at you. It'll be a luxury. It'll be something that comes along with fine dining. Already you walk into any lower level restaurant, a Starbucks, a McDonald's, a Burger King, you're ordering on the app. You're ordering with a screen. You're not talking to someone necessarily. That'll be the same as you go into that. No one's going to drive a truck or a delivery van for a living in a few years. No one's going to drive a taxi cab for a living in a few years. And you suddenly start thinking of the societal impacts of no driving jobs, no waiting jobs, and you start to see that there's going to have to be a societal impact of this too. And I agree, you, Mary. You can either look at that being scary or look at it being a massive opportunity, and hopefully it will be the latter. But we'll see.
Do you know what? I think the number, I'm gonna throw a number out here. Do you know what over 80% of Americans did or were doing in 1900? What industry their jobs were related to?
Farming, I would guess, agriculture.
Agriculture. Um, Look, I don't mean to underplay the fact that this is a big problem that we got to solve, but we've been solving this problem forever. Software always replaces jobs, automates things, makes things more efficient, and basically it eats jobs. The microchip eats jobs. I mean, I remember in 1990, early 1990s, reading a speech, a transcript of a speech from a guy that I absolutely love, and he's still around, a guy named Dan Sullivan from the Strategic Coach. In 1993, he was saying, the microchip eats bureaucratic jobs. That's what happens with software. What AI is eating is jobs that require maybe less skill. So, and Sean, you outlined a whole bunch of them in those jobs today. Put food on the table for a lot of people. So it's not, I don't mean to undersell the problem, especially for those people. They're going to have to find a new way to contribute. But I'm an optimist. We always have. We've dealt with this forever in the industrialized world. And, in a few years, there'll probably be another technology that is going to come along that's going to create some of the same issues. We'll figure it out, and it's not going to
I
be.
don't doubt that, Tom. That's what I mean. I think to Mary's point, it's not a pessimistic view. It's
Yeah,
optimistic, but it is going to have a significant shift. But if
yeah.
you look at the UK, we 100 years ago, you're talking about agriculture being a big job. We had a massive industrial base. We had something like 300,000 people employed on building ships.
Mm.
We don't build any ships anymore. We had in my childhood 120,000 people that would go down mines to dig coal. We don't have anyone digging coal in the UK now. So all of a sudden you've got 500,000 jobs that were core, primary bread winning jobs for families gone, but they migrate elsewhere. You're right. What gets taken away gets added to as well. But I think the speed and the breadth of the impact is something that will be interesting how it's managed. I'm with you. I'm optimistic. I just think it's probably going to be a swift and broader change than maybe we've seen
I
historically.
think it
No
happens
managed
faster now.
decline.
Yes,
Yeah, it's like
I agree.
bang.
It happens faster now.
Yeah, so that's the one to watch out for. But it's nothing's going to stand in its way. So we need to figure it out. Is the
No,
key. You can't
no.
can't shake our fist at it and say, I wish this wasn't happening, because it is.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And if you have any other trends that you want to share with us that you have predictions for or that you're building your strategies around, and always, whenever you're building your strategy with trends, we always hope that you go through the eyes of your customer and stakeholders and say, so what? Because that's where the big opportunity will be, is through their eyes. So good luck and thank you.
Thank you.